Mr. Calhoun, your vehicle is in violation of Ridgecrest community standards and will be towed at your expense if it is not removed from the common area boundary within 48 hours. That was Diane Pratt, president of the Ridgecrest Homeowners Association, standing at the edge of my gravel drive on a Tuesday morning in October of 2020, holding a clipboard in one hand and a laminated copy of something she called the Community Standards Handbook in the other. She had white sneakers on, the kind that had never touched anything but pavement, and a blazer the color of a fire hydrant. My truck was a 2014 GMC Sierra, dark green, parked on my own property, on a 0.4-acre parcel that I had owned free and clear for 11 years. What Diane Pratt did not know, what she had never once bothered to look up before she printed that notice, put on those sneakers, and drove her white SUV down Ridgecrest Drive, was that my parcel was not part of her HOA. It was never part of her HOA. The recorded plat that created the Ridgecrest subdivision in 2012 showed my lot as an excluded parcel, boundary line drawn in ink, recorded at the county clerk's office, and sitting in my filing cabinet in a manila folder that my late wife Clara had labeled the moment she bought the land. I had that folder. I had known about that boundary for 11 years. What I did not know yet, standing there in the gravel with Scout pressing against my boot, was that the lot Diane's board members parked on every other Wednesday evening was 3 years delinquent on its property taxes and available to any member of the public who wanted to pay the bill. What would you have done in my shoes? I already knew the answer. I was going to let Diane Pratt commit to a position she could not defend, file every single letter and notice and fine in that folder, and wait until the right moment to show her what was in it. My name is Ray Calhoun. I'm 58 years old. I ran heavy equipment for 23 years, mostly grading and excavation work across southern Colorado, and I know how to read a survey map the way some men read a menu. My wife Clara bought this parcel on Ridgecrest Drive in the spring of 2009, 2 years after we married and 3 years before anyone had ever heard of the Ridgecrest HOA. Clara picked the lot because it sat on the western end of the road, backed up to a creek drainage, and had the kind of quiet that you can only find outside city limits. The road was dirt then, and the land east of us was open scrub, and on clear mornings you could see the ridge line from the workshop door. We built that workshop ourselves the first summer, framed it on a county permit, poured the slab by hand, wired it ourselves with a licensed electrician signing off. We put in the gravel drive. We planted 2 cottonwoods along the south fence line because Clara liked the way they moved in wind. She kept a vegetable garden in the southeast corner, and she kept records the way other people keep faith. Every permit stamped and filed, every survey notation annotated in her careful handwriting, every county correspondence answered within the week and copied twice. Clara passed in the spring of 2018 from a cancer that moved faster than either of us expected. What she left me besides grief was this parcel, free and clear, and a filing habit she had started the day we closed. 5 labeled manila folders in a fireproof cabinet in the workshop. Deed and title, permits and inspections, surveys and boundary, county correspondence, and a 5th one she had labeled miscellaneous, and which turned out to contain things like the receipt for the cottonwood saplings and a note from the neighbor down the road congratulating us on the slab pour. My daughter Callie was 14 when we lost Clara. She had grown up in this workshop, in this gravel, on this road. That mattered. That was the ground I was standing on when Diane Pratt first came up my driveway. The Ridgecrest HOA had been formed in 2012 by the developer who built the subdivision on the eastern portion of the road. 52 lots in 2 phases, a gated entrance with a stone sign, and a set of covenants recorded against every lot in the plat. My parcel, sitting on the western end with a separate legal description, established in 2009 and a separate tax parcel number assigned by the county assessor, was drawn entirely outside the platted subdivision boundary. This was not a gray area. It was a surveyed line on a government-recorded document. The HOA had sent me a welcome packet in 2013, the kind of thing a property manager assembles without checking the plat. And I had returned it with a polite letter citing the recording information and enclosing a copy of the boundary exhibit. Nobody wrote back. I assumed the matter was settled. 7 years passed. Callie grew up. I kept the workshop running, taking the occasional grading contract when the right job came along, spending most of my time on a 5-acre reclamation project up the road that paid steady. Then Diane Pratt got herself elected HOA president in the spring of 2020, and apparently nobody had bothered to brief her on that 7-year-old letter. Because that October she came down my drive with her handbook and her sneakers and told me my truck was a problem. I wrote her a response that same week. I did not make it long. I kept the letter to 2 paragraphs, both of them factual and neither of them angry, because Clara had taught me that an angry letter gives the other party something to argue with, and a plain factual letter gives them nothing. I noted that my parcel was not within the Ridgecrest platted boundary, gave the book and page number for the recorded plat, referenced the 2013 letter I had sent to the prior management company and the boundary exhibit I had enclosed with it, and offered to meet with her or the board if she had questions about the documentation. I signed it, made 2 copies, and sent the original certified mail with return receipt requested. I kept the green card. I dropped a copy in a fresh manila folder and wrote on the tab in my own handwriting what Clara would have written. Ridgecrest HOA, Diane Pratt, 2020 to present. I set it in the filing cabinet next to the folder labeled Deed and Title. I went back to work. I heard nothing from Diane Pratt for 3 months. I stayed careful. In January of 2021, a fine notice arrived. $150 for repeated failure to address a compliance notice. I had responded to their initial notice in writing with documentation within the week. I filed the fine notice, wrote another certified response, and noted that I was retaining documentation of all correspondence and would be prepared to produce it in any proceeding. In March, the second fine arrived. This one, $300, now adding the workshop to the complaint. They were calling it a non-conforming accessory structure. The workshop had been permitted by the county in the spring of 2011, a full year before the Ridgecrest plat was recorded. I sent another certified letter. I pulled the original permit from Clara's folder and made 2 copies, one for my response and one for the new file. In June, the 3rd fine arrived. $950, combining the first 2 plus a $20 processing fee and a $15 administrative surcharge that I could not find any authority for anywhere in their published documents. The running total was $1,400. I did not pay any of it. What I did was mount 2 cameras on the workshop, one on the south fascia facing the drive, and one on the north corner facing the road, both feeding to a hard drive inside the building and a second drive I kept in the house under the kitchen counter. Callie noticed the cameras going up and asked me why. I told her the whole thing from the beginning, sitting at the kitchen table on a Sunday afternoon, the folder open between us. She listened without interrupting, which she had always done since she was small, a habit she got from her mother. When I finished, she looked at the folder and said, "So she's never actually read the map." I said I did not believe she had. Callie thought about that for a moment, then asked if she could help label folders. In September of 2021, a man appeared at my gate in what looked like a county uniform. Tan shirt, ball cap with a county seal embroidered on the front, clipboard, the whole costume, He told me he was a code enforcement officer and that he had received a formal complaint about my workshop requiring an on-site inspection. I asked him to hold at the gate while I came to meet him. I asked for his badge number and his county employee ID, the kind with the photo and the department name printed across the top that every actual county employee carries. He looked at the gate post. He looked at the camera on the fascia. He said he would need to come back with his paperwork and he would reschedule. I said that was fine and that I looked forward to seeing his credentials at that time. He got in his truck and left without the paperwork. I wrote down the time and the plate number before he reached the road. I ran the registration that afternoon through the county assessor's vehicle search, which is a public tool, and the truck came back registered to a private citizen named Kevin Tull at a Pueblo address. Not a county vehicle, not a county employee. I added Kevin Tull's name, the plate number, the date, and the time to the file. Then I called Deputy Sid Torres. Sid ran out of the county sheriff's substation about 8 miles east, and I had met him 3 years earlier through a neighbor who ran cattle on the adjacent parcel. Sid was a compact man in his early 50s, who wore his uniform like he had been born in it. And he had an officer's way of listening without his face giving anything away until he was ready to say something useful. I walked him through the full sequence. The 2013 letter that established the boundary, the welcome packet I had returned, 7 years of quiet, then Diane Pratt's arrival in October 2020, the 3 escalating fines, and now this man at my gate, claiming to be a county employee who could not produce a badge number or an ID and who drove a truck registered to a private citizen in Pueblo. Sid listened to all of it without interrupting. When I finished, he was quiet for a moment, and then he asked how many of the interactions I had in writing. I told him every one of them, certified mail with return receipt cards, dated and filed. He said the impersonation incident was notable because it was the first thing that might constitute a criminal act. But the man had left when asked for credentials and had not entered the property. So without a formal complaint and a named victim, he could not open a case. He said what counted in the long run was not any single incident, but the documented pattern, and that what I was building, methodically, notice by notice, was exactly the kind of record a judge in a civil harassment proceeding would want to see laid in front of him. He told me I needed at least 6 documented incidents with written evidence before a civil filing would carry real weight with the court. I counted on my fingers. I was at 5. The 6th happened on a Friday evening in October of 2022. Callie had a cross-country meet 40 miles east at a school up near the state park, and I had driven her out there myself, which meant the truck was off the property for about 6 hours, sitting in a school parking lot while she ran the 3-mile course through pine scrub in 45 degrees. We came back after dark, headlights sweeping the drive, and the drive was empty. The truck was gone. There was a notice tacked to the gate post, signed by Diane Pratt under the HOA letterhead, stating that the vehicle had been removed as an abandoned nuisance from common area property in accordance with Sections 4 and 7 of the Community Standards Handbook. The tow company was listed as Ridge Towing and Recovery. I stood there in the cold for a moment, reading it. Callie stood next to me, her cross-country spikes still on, mud drying on her calves, and she read the notice over my shoulder without saying anything. There was a long pause where neither of us spoke. The road was quiet, no other vehicles, just the sound of the creek drainage behind the property. I took the notice off the gate post and folded it carefully along the existing crease and put it in my jacket pocket. Inside, I called the tow company, confirmed the truck was on their lot, and was told the release fee was $380 plus $45 per day of storage beginning at midnight, and that I would need to sign a release form. I did not argue with any of it. I confirmed the address, got in Callie's sedan, which was the only vehicle left on the property, and drove 40 minutes to the tow yard. I paid the release fee in cash, took the receipt and the storage invoice and the tow order they were required by law to provide, and drove the truck back to the property myself with Callie following in her car. It was past 11 by the time we were both parked. I set the tow documents on the kitchen table and smoothed them flat and looked at them for a minute. Then I opened my laptop. Callie was asleep by the time I got home, or pretending to be. I sat at the kitchen table for a while with the tow invoice and the notice in front of me, and then I opened my laptop and navigated to the county treasurer's public tax portal. I had been watching one particular parcel for over a year. The 0.3-acre gravel lot directly adjacent to my western fence line, which had no structure on it and had been used by the HOA board as an informal overflow parking area for as long as I had been paying attention, was listed under a dissolved Colorado LLC as the registered owner. The LLC had stopped paying property taxes in 2019. 3 full years of delinquency, with penalties and fees added each year. The total outstanding balance showing on the treasurer's portal that October night was $4,812. I looked at that number for a long time. In Colorado, delinquent tax parcels eventually come to a public auction administered by the county treasurer, and any member of the public can register to bid. The redemption process is defined by statute, and it is not complicated if you take the time to read it. I took the time. I printed the treasurer's auction schedule. The next sale was set for the first week of December, 6 weeks out. I called Frank DeLuca the following morning. Frank was the deputy clerk at the county assessor's office, a compact man in his 60s who had worked that desk for more than 20 years and who had helped me sort out a clerical error on my own parcel back in 2015. Frank knew property records the way I knew cut grades, which is to say, he knew exactly where the solid ground was and exactly where you were going to sink. He confirmed the parcel was on the December auction list. He walked me through the process, the registration deadline, the deposit requirement, the minimum bid to clear the delinquency, the redemption period that ran after the sale, during which the prior owner could theoretically reclaim the parcel, and what a winning bidder received at the end of it if no redemption came. The dissolved LLC, he noted, had no active registered agent and had not filed with the state in 4 years. The probability of redemption was essentially 0. I thanked him and hung up. I did not mention this conversation to anyone except Callie, and with her I only said that I was looking into something and that I needed her to keep paying attention to which vehicles were parked on that gravel lot and on which days when she walked Scout past it after school. She took the instruction without question, and for the next 6 weeks she came in most evenings and reported what she had observed. The white SUV, a gray sedan with a magnetic sign on the door reading Pratt Development LLC, a second board member's SUV, sometimes a pickup with HOA vinyl on the rear glass. She wrote the makes, approximate colors, and dates in a spiral notebook without being asked. She was her mother's daughter. I registered for the auction in the 3rd week of November. On a cold Thursday morning in early December of 2022, I drove to the county treasurer's annex and sat in a folding chair in a room that smelled like old carpet and copier toner. 11 other people were there, most of them in work jackets and boots, the kind of investors who show up to these things regularly and flip delinquent properties for a living. None of them were interested in a 0.3-acre parcel of bare gravel with no utilities, no structure, no assigned address, and no obvious development potential. When the lot came up, I raised my number. Nobody else moved. I paid $4,812, the minimum required to clear 3 years of back taxes, penalties, and the county's administrative fee. The treasurer's clerk handed me the paperwork and told me the recording would be completed that afternoon at the clerk's office. I walked across the parking lot in the cold and drove to the clerk's office myself and watched it go into the book. Then I drove home with a certified copy in the passenger seat and stopped at the diner on the county road and ate a piece of peach pie at the counter. I want to be precise about what I had done and what I had not done. I had not done anything retaliatory. I had not done anything unusual. I had purchased a piece of real property at a publicly administered government auction on equal terms with any other citizen, using a process codified in Colorado statute that had been available to any member of the public for the entire 3 years the lot was sitting delinquent on the treasurer's roll. The HOA board had been parking on land they did not own and had never bothered to examine, because they had never looked at who held title or whether the taxes were being paid. The information had been public the entire time. I had looked. That was the whole difference. In January of 2023, I wrote a short and factual letter to the Ridgecrest HOA board. I thought about how to write it for 2 evenings before I did it. I thought about every notice they had sent me, and about the tow receipt in my drawer, and about the gate post that night in October with Callie standing in the cold in her cross-country spikes. And then I sat down, and I wrote the same kind of letter Clara would have written. Plain, factual, without a word of edge in it. I identified myself, noted the parcel by its county assessor number, stated the date of the tax deed conveyance and the recording information, attached a copy of the recorded deed, and informed the board that any vehicles parked on the lot would need to be removed within 30 days of the letter date. I did not reference the towing. I did not reference the fines. I did not say one word about the previous 3 years. I stated that I owned the lot and that the 30-day period constituted reasonable notice. I certified the letter, kept the green return card, and filed the copy. Then I went to bed. 30 days was fair notice. More than fair, really. 2 weeks later, on a Saturday morning, Diane Pratt arrived at the lot with 2 other board members and 3 vehicles, parking them in the gravel with a deliberateness that made clear the letter had been received, and the contents of it were being contested in the most visible way available to her. Callie was inside doing schoolwork when I saw them from the workshop window. She came to stand next to me and watch through the glass. Diane walked to my fence line and positioned herself with her arms crossed, waiting for me to come out. I came out with Scout at my boot. She had on the red blazer again, and one of the board members behind her had a clipboard. She told me, at a volume the neighbors 2 lots over could have heard, that the lot had been part of the community's regular use for more than 3 years, that the residents had relied on that access in good faith, and that a tax deed from some county auction was not going to override established community practice or the rights of 52 homeowners. She said the HOA's attorney would be examining the legality of the sale and that she expected to hear from him within the week. Then she said, "Mr. Calhoun, you are not going to bully this community with a piece of paper." I looked at her across the fence. Scout had not moved. I said in a level voice, "I own the lot. The deed is recorded at the clerk's office. The 30 days run out on the 15th of this month." I went inside. The camera on the north corner ran for another 4 minutes and 12 seconds before they all got in their vehicles and drove away. I pulled the footage that evening and saved it to both drives. Callie sat at the kitchen table and watched it with me without comment. She wrote the date and the description in her notebook and closed it. The HOA filed suit in County District Court in March of 2023. The complaint was 4 pages, and it went after everything at once. The tax deed was allegedly procedurally defective. My parcel was subject to HOA jurisdiction, and the accumulated fines were lawfully assessed. The towing had been executed under proper community authority. and I had engaged in harassment by acquiring adjacent property for the purpose of interfering with community governance. The last claim was the one I read twice. I had purchased a delinquent tax parcel at a public auction, and they had written that down as harassment. I called Renata Cruz in Pueblo. Frank had given me her name 2 years earlier, a property attorney who had handled half a dozen HOA boundary disputes in the county. Renata read the complaint the same day I sent it to her and called me back that evening. She said the tax deed challenge had essentially no legal foundation under Colorado statute. She said the jurisdictional claim was going to run directly into the recorded plat boundary exhibit. She said the towing claim, once the parcel survey was formally established in front of a judge, was probably going to be the most expensive piece of paper Diane Pratt had ever signed. Renata filed a counterclaim within the week. She named trespass for the towing from my deeded parcel, wrongful towing with damages, civil harassment based on the documented pattern going back to 2020, and attorney fee recovery under the relevant statutory provision. Discovery opened in the summer of 2023, and what came out of it was the part I had suspected but could not prove from the outside. The gray sedan with the Pratt development magnet that Callie had been recording in her notebook was registered to Brent Pratt, Diane's husband. Brent ran a small development company that had been working the eastern corridor of Ridgecrest Drive for several years, acquiring lots and packaging them for resale as a 14-lot subdivision. Renata pulled the Planning Commission file. The subdivision application Brent had submitted in 2021 included an access easement requirement that ran along the western edge of the road, the corridor where my parcel and the gravel lot both sat. Without a recorded easement across that corridor, the subdivision could not be approved. The easement could not be granted by the HOA over my parcel because my parcel was not in the HOA. It would have to be purchased from me, negotiated from the county, or condemned, none of which Brent's timeline or budget apparently accommodated. What he had apparently decided instead was to let his wife's HOA board treat my parcel as though it were subject to their authority long enough to establish a pattern of community use, which might then be argued as the basis for an easement claim. Renata also found a letter in the county planning file, written by Brent Pratt in the fall of 2020. The same autumn Diane had first appeared at my driveway with her clipboard, urging the planning department to treat my parcel as functionally within the Ridgecrest community for purposes of access negotiation. The letter was a public record. It had been sitting in the planning file the entire time. Nobody had looked for it. Renata put it in the exhibit binder and called Frank, who confirmed that Brent's subdivision application had been formally tabled pending the outcome of the active litigation. 0 of the 14 lots had been approved or conveyed. The entire development was parked, waiting on a court to say which way the boundary ran. A county planning commission meeting was scheduled for the second Tuesday of April 2024 to review the tabled access corridor question and decide whether to formally deny the Pratt development application or hold it pending the outcome of the active litigation. Renata and I discussed the timing, and we both agreed this was the right moment. The meeting was public, it was on the record, and the commission had the authority to rule on the access question independent of the civil case. We would not be staging a confrontation. We would be presenting 3 documents to a professional body and letting them do the same thing Harold Webb had been doing for 20 years, which was reading a map. I organized the exhibit binder the night before, sitting at the kitchen table with the filing cabinet open beside me. Deed and title, boundary exhibit, tax deed for the gravel lot, surveyor's certificate. Margot Wills's box of HOA meeting minutes, tabbed and indexed, with the 6 Calhoun parcel votes highlighted in yellow and the 3 Brent Pratt development timeline references flagged with adhesive tabs. Frank had come by the week before and looked through the planning file with me, confirming the chain of the application and the date on Brent's 2020 letter to the planning department. Renata put everything in numbered order. We arrived 30 minutes early. Diane and Brent Pratt came in together with their attorney 8 minutes before the meeting started and took seats on the public side of the room. Brent sat with his hands on his knees and did not look at me. Callie had asked to come, telling me she had been in this since the beginning and wanted to see how it ended. And I had said yes without much deliberation because she was right on both counts. She sat in the back row with a pen and her old spiral notebook, just habit at this point. And Margot Wills, who had resigned from the HOA board in February after watching the Calhoun matter handled in ways she had not signed up for, sat 2 seats to Callie's left. Margot had called Renata in the last week of January and said she had a box of meeting minutes and a conscience she could not ignore any longer. She had shown up at Renata's office 2 days later, looking like someone who had been carrying something heavy for longer than was good for her. Those minutes documented 6 separate board votes on the Calhoun parcel going back to 2020, and 3 separate references to Brent's development timeline as the stated reason for urgency. When the item was called, Renata laid 3 documents on the commissioner's table: the recorded plat with the original boundary exhibit, the tax deed for the gravel lot, and a surveyor's boundary certificate I had obtained the previous fall that formally confirmed the line between my parcel and the platted subdivision. The commission chair, a retired civil engineer named Harold Webb, took the plat first. He looked at it for a full minute, maybe longer. He turned it to read the legal description on the cover sheet, checked the recording information in the margin, and then he looked at the boundary exhibit. He looked at it with the quiet attention of someone who had read a lot of these. Then he said, without raising his voice, "This parcel was never in the platted boundary." Renata said, "No, sir. The exclusion is recorded in 2009, 3 years before the Ridgecrest plat." Harold set the plat down and picked up the tax deed. He read the parcel description and the recording date. He put it next to the plat. He looked at the surveyor's certificate. Then he turned to look at the Pratt's attorney and he said, "Counselor, on what legal basis does the access easement application proceed?" The attorney offered something about established community use and historical parking patterns. Harold said without sharpening his voice, "There is no recorded easement. The parcel is excluded from the plat by documentation predating the HOA's formation by 3 years. The adjacent lot is under private deed ownership following a properly administered tax sale. The basis for an access easement claim does not appear to exist in this record." He looked back at the table and wrote a notation in the file. The commission voted 4-1 to formally deny the subdivision application. The whole proceeding took 11 minutes. The denial triggered the thing Brent's attorney had not apparently modeled. The development company had borrowed against projected lot sales to fund the planning and legal phases of the project. With the application formally denied and the active counterclaim still outstanding, the lender began calling. Brent had structured his borrowing against the expectation that 14 lots would be approved and under contract by the end of 2024. 0 lots had been approved. The collateral behind the loan was now a set of assembled parcels on a road with a blocked access corridor and an ongoing lawsuit. By June of 2024, the note had been called in full, and Pratt Development LLC had filed for voluntary dissolution with the state. Renata got a call from the Pratt's attorney in the 3rd week of June, asking whether we would accept a settlement conference. We went in July. The HOA's lawsuit was formally withdrawn at the start of that meeting. The counterclaim settled in August for $47,000 total, covering the release fee and storage from the tow. The full $1,400 in reversed fines, plus the years of compounding they had tried to add to the balance. Renata's complete invoice through the date of settlement. and a damages figure reflecting the documented harassment pattern and the unlawful impersonation scheme from 2021. Renata called me the afternoon the wire cleared and told me in her dry way that it was one of the more thorough outcomes she had seen. I thanked her and told her the filing habit had been my wife's idea. There was a short pause, and then she said she would send Clara a bill in the next life. I told her Clara would have paid it without complaint. My parcel remained mine. The gravel lot remained mine. The recorded plat boundary that Clara had filed in a manila folder in the spring of 2009 remained exactly what it had always been. A line on a government document, older than the HOA, older than the dispute, older than any clipboard Diane Pratt had ever carried. I put a cable gate across the gravel lot and padlocked it with a lock I already had in the shop. Scout lay in the gravel next to me while I set the cable, chin on his front paws, watching the road. The white SUV did not come back down Ridgecrest Drive. Neither did the gray sedan. That October, I drove Callie out to look at a college campus, 3 hours east, both of us quiet most of the way with the San Isabel Range falling behind us and the plains opening out wide and flat ahead. The filing cabinet was locked in the workshop. The cable was on the gate. The deed was recorded. At some point past Walsenburg, she said without much setup, Mom would have liked how boring all of that was. I thought about it for a mile or two. The workshop, the filing cabinet. 5 manila folders in Clara's handwriting started on the day we closed. One of them still had the receipt for the cottonwood saplings inside it, and both of those trees were gold by now, turning in the fall wind off the creek. I told Callie her mother was exactly right. Callie looked out the window at the eastern plains opening up ahead of us, and she said, she always said the paperwork was the whole point. We stopped at a rest area and sat with the engine off for a while, not talking, the kind of quiet that does not need filling. The gate was locked, the cable was solid, the deed was filed. That was enough. Here is what this cost me and what it taught me in plain terms. Before you receive your first notice from any HOA, pull your parcel's recorded plat from the county clerk's office. Not the HOA's map, the government's map, the one with the surveyed boundary and the recording date and the legal descriptions of every lot in the subdivision. Confirm that your parcel number appears inside that boundary, because if it does not, no covenant in that HOA's recorded declaration can reach you. Get that document now, before anything starts, while it costs you nothing but an afternoon and a records request. And while you are on that public portal, look at the delinquent tax roll for the parcels around you. That information is public in most jurisdictions. Any citizen can access it. And a lot sitting 3 years delinquent with a dissolved LLC, as the owner is a fact available to everyone, including you. I am not telling you to go acquire your neighbor's problems. I am telling you that the public record contains information that the people waving fine notices at you have never read. And the person who reads it first determines how the conversation goes. Drop your own story in the comments if any of this sounds familiar. If you are new here, consider subscribing. Next week, I will tell you about a retired school teacher who discovered her HOA had been collecting dues on a lot their own governing documents said they had no authority over for 11 years, and what it took to get those years of payments back. That one required a state attorney general. I will see you then.